I gotta say, with this Raptor having 427 gears, when you lean into that boost, welcome back, I'm Alex, and we're in the shop today with this Ford Ranger Raptor, and we were having some fun with her, smashing her down some logging roads, and I was impressed.
Woo! This thing flies!
But today I want to focus on what's under the hood, the power plant in this Ranger Raptor, because it's a little bit unique to the truck segment. I wasn't kidding, we were having some fun. Probably should have cleaned this engine bay, but we have a 3-liter twin turbocharged V6 EcoBoost engine, a little Ford performance. And I know, I hear you fine fellas that want absolutely nothing to do with a turbocharged engine, but I think Ford has done a pretty nice job with this engine. Aside from this pretty Ford performance badge, the engine bay under here is pretty ugly. You get a little bit of a spaghetti factory going on, piping everywhere, and that's sort of what happens with the twin turbocharged V6 engine, and you just don't really know where to start looking. That's your intake right there. Could Ford have put a nice plastic cover over here? Yeah, maybe. Looks aside, this mill made its debut in 2017 in the Lincoln Continental, I believe, and is heavily based off the 2.7-liter EcoBoost. In the Ranger Raptor format, this 3-liter is making 405 horsepower, 430 pound-feet of torque. But if that is not enough power for you, apparently you can get the Ford Factory Performance Tune on this engine, and that'll bring you up to 455 horsepower, 536 pound-feet of torque. So this little 3-liter, she can pack a punch.
I really think this is a cool upgrade. Normally it's about $850, but right now at this dealership, you can get it for $660, a little bit of a discount. But for that money, you get an extra 50 horsepower, an extra 106 pound-feet of torque, and from my understanding, you still keep your warranty. I really wish more manufacturers would do this, especially with all the turbocharged engines now on the market.
Up top, this engine shares the exact same composite intake manifold as well as the aluminum heads as the 2.7-liter EcoBoost. This engine is also a dual overhead cam setup, meaning that we have not one, not two, 4 camshafts in the heads of these engines. And along with that, which we'll discuss a little bit further in a bit, is we have 4 cam phasers. Now, cam phasers help to adjust the timing of the engine depending on driving conditions, but like I said, we'll touch on that in a bit. We also have a direct injection fuel system on this engine, and the high pressure fuel pump is capable of having injection pressures just under 3,000 PSI, which is gonna help with throttle response, efficiency, as well as power delivery. Now, on Ford's official website for the spec sheet of these 2025 Ford Ranger Raptors, it lists the fueling system as direct injection as well as port injection. There does seem to be some controversy online saying that Ford made a typo and this engine is only direct injection because the Explorer STs with the 3-liters are indeed only direct injection.
Here's an example of this controversy on this Ranger form. They're talking about the 3-liter EcoBoost in the Ford STs, which from my understanding are indeed only direct injection. This fella says, the article says direct injection, but our 3-liters are both port and direct injection on the Ranger. And then you get this fella saying, well, actually, it's a typo on the Ford website. The Rangers only have direct injection. And right here, you can see this is a spec sheet of the 3-liters in the Ford STs, and it clearly says only direct injection. This gentleman says both the US and Canadian websites show the 3-liter having port and direct injection, which I can confirm that is exactly what it says. Whereas this fella says you can walk out and look and tell that it's not both. It is a misprint on Ford's part. Now, fellas, I don't directly work on these engines, so if anyone actually works at Ford and knows concretely if these Ford Rangers are direct and port injection, please let me know in the comments, but here's my 2 cents.
This is the second year of the Ford Ranger, and for Ford to have a typo on their official spec sheet 2 years in a row seems a little bit slim. Also, this engine, as far as I'm aware, is made on the exact same assembly line as the 2.7-liter EcoBoost going in the F-150s, and those 2.7 liters are both direct and port injection. So if I had to guess, and you guys can let me know what you think, this engine is direct injection as well as port injection, and there's a number of benefits to that, which we'll get into. Now, I've talked about this many times, but having both direct injection and port injection is sort of like having the best of both worlds. With direct injection, you get that added throttle response, power delivery, efficiency, But the biggest, or one of the main consequences of direct injection, is that you start to build carbon deposits on your intake and intake valve as the years go by, and this can become a rather large issue, and it's not easy to fix. Both the 3.5 liter EcoBoost as well as the 2.7 liter EcoBoost have added port injection along with their direct injection. And what that does is it cleans the intake and essentially resolves the carbon intake problem with direct injection, which is why I say it's the best of both worlds. And I would hope that this engine has both direct and port injection. It would be very, very nice. I'm not 100% sure. I'm sure someone on the old interweb can let me know if I am correct or not. All right, moving down to the rotating assembly, the 2.7 liter EcoBoost is a perfectly square engine, meaning that the bore and the stroke are the exact same size. This 3 liter engine is not 100% square engine like its sister counterpart, but it's pretty damn close, and that's gonna lead to some great engine versatility. You get some good low-end performance, but also have the ability to have some great high-end performance as well. I mean, this engine rips through gears, and it's a little bit euphoric if I'm gonna be honest. The design of the rotating assembly is a little bit different than the 2.7 liter, but more or less the same. First of all, with the bigger displacements, we're gonna have a larger bore, a longer stroke. The pistons are still forged aluminum, but they're a little bit different on this 3 liter. The skirt section is a little bit larger. There's more material underneath the wrist pin, as well as oil squirters. So oil is gonna be squirted on the bottom side of the piston to try and help cool the piston more efficiently. So this engine gets a nice upgraded piston design. Here's a piston right here, for example. This is the skirt section, so we're probably gonna have a longer skirt. This is where your wrist pin goes. So we're gonna have some more material in here. It's just gonna make the piston stronger. Now, in terms of the oil squirters, it's as simple as it sounds. There's gonna be a little bit of oil squirting underneath or at the bottom of this piston, and it helps to cool the piston. And when we're putting a ton of boost in this engine, we're not gonna fry these pistons. With that different piston design, this engine actually has a lower compression ratio, 9.5 to 1 versus the 2.7 liter, which I believe has a 10.3 to 1 compression ratio. And it may sound a little bit counterintuitive. If you wanna make more power, you'd think you want a higher compression ratio, but from my understanding, with a somewhat lower compression ratio, it allows the turbos to be more effective and push more boost into the engine. The downside is you are gonna lose a little bit of efficiency. Underneath the piston, we have fully forged I-beam style connecting rods with fractured caps. And like the 2.7 liter, those connecting rods are gonna be offset, and that's gonna help keep the connecting rod closer to 90 degrees at peak cylinder pressure. It just helps to transfer more torque to the crankshaft. Really, really like that design, and should add some great strength to this engine. Speaking of crankshafts, we have a fully forged crankshaft rounding out this very durable and strong rotating assembly. These engines are designed to take some abuse. In terms of engine block in this 3 liter, we have a slightly different setup, but still share the same ladder style as the 2.7 liter. From my understanding, the crankcase on this 3 liter is not compacted graphite iron. It only has CGI on the upper portion of the engine block where those high cylinder pressures are to give strength where it is needed, whereas the 2.7 liter has more of its engine block, the crankcase, as compacted graphite iron. So the 2.7 liter could be argued to have a stronger engine block, but we do have some nice upgraded pistons on this engine, so there's a little bit of trade-off between those two sister engines. And how could we forget about the old snails, the twin turbos, somewhere under this mess here. They're slightly bigger than the 2.7 liters with 39.4 millimeter compressor wheels versus just 39. And on a stock tune, they'll run you up to about 18 PSI of boost. All right, now that I'm actually looking at this turbo, if we take a look at all this complicated piping, it does make some sense. So here's our air intake going into the turbo. Follow that over. That's going into our left side turbo. This is our charged air coming out of our turbo. Boom, 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 boom. That's our charged air coming from our left side. Both going down into our air-to-air intercooler, which I like to see. Some guys argue that a water-to-air intercooler is more efficient. It might be, but this is just so much simpler, and I like the air-to-air better. Coming back up top, we can see our charged air out of the air-to-air. Our cooled charged air comes up, and that goes into our intake. So
looks very complex, but if you follow it along, it makes sense.
I gotta say, with this Raptor having 427 gears, when you lean into that boost, Ford has made a fun platform for this engine, and dare I say, it actually sounds pretty good. If you haven't figured it out yet, I'm a little bit of a fan of both the 2.7 liter and the 3 liter Nano EcoBoost engines, built far superior than the 3.5 liter EcoBoost, and sort of stand on their own in the EcoBoost lineup as very durable engines. And if I had to buy a turbo engine in a pickup truck, it would be the 2.7 liter EcoBoost, hands down, but I'd be pretty happy owning this 3 liter as well. Now, with that being said, there are certainly some things that you should be aware of if you own one of these engines. Right off the bat is the complexity. As we talked about earlier, a little bit of a spaghetti factory under here. We got piping, wiring, sensors, all up in here. And without a doubt, there's more failure points on a twin turbocharged V6 engine than a naturally aspirated V8. So there is potential for more things to go wrong. Next, and a big thing that I don't like about these engines, is the wet oil pump belt. So traditionally, your oil pump, which sends oil all through the engine, very, very critical, is normally driven by a gear or more likely a chain. Well, Ford has changed it up, and a number of manufacturers have done this with their recent engines, to a wet rubber belt. And to me, it just feels cheap, and yes, there does seem to be some durability to these wet rubber belts, but it's not something that I would necessarily want on my engine, and it's just something that you guys should be aware about. Next is cam phasers, a very dirty word with these EcoBoost engines. The 3.5 liter was notorious for having cam phaser failures, and on this engine with 4 camshafts, we get 4 cam phasers. A cam phaser, what it does essentially is it shifts the camshaft and it adjusts the engine timing depending on driving conditions. It either advances or retards the engine timing to either have more efficiency or more power delivery. A lot of auto manufacturers use cam phasers, so it's not just Ford, but Ford uses engine oil pressure to control their cam phasers. And well, on the 3.5 liter EcoBoost, those cam phasers were famous for the lockout pins failing. So on engine startup, the cam phaser, when it didn't have oil pressure, would just sort of slap around and you get a really loud rattling noise.
This is what a cam phaser that's broken sounds like. And once you get oil pressure, it goes away.
So once the phasers get engine oil pressure, they tend to function normally, but they can be a pain to replace. I know on these 3 liters in the Ford Explorer STs, it's like 20 to 22 hours of labor to replace a cam phaser. I believe the body has to be separated from the engine, and it makes it a relatively expensive job. Silver lining is a failed cam phaser tends not to be a fatal issue, rather just annoying. Turbos, baby, always open to failing, especially the longer you have the engine. As a diesel mechanic, I've replaced a lot of turbos, and usually they don't last the life of the engine. So if you plan on having a 2.7 liter or a 3 liter for a long time, you may end up having to replace a set of turbos.
Another common complaint with this engine is the fact that it has a plastic oil pan and it often leaks.
Lastly, make sure you're changing your oil on a regular basis. Look, we actually even have a dipstick on here. Ram. Forced induction as well as a direct injection engine, you're more likely to have fuel dilution in the oil, especially if you're running these things on long oil change intervals. I would say you want to change your oil every 5,000 to 6,000 miles at the latest. Usually the first component to fail with fuel diluting the oil is your turbo, so just keep that in mind. So overall, I think the 3 liter twin turbocharged V6 EcoBoost is a decent little engine. I'd probably be happy to own one. Is it gonna last 20 years? No, probably not, but Ford has been doing turbocharged engines in trucks the longest, with almost 15 years of data, so hopefully that has helped them make a somewhat reliable product. Let me know what you guys think. Are you avidly against turbocharged engines in pickup trucks, or would you think that a 3-liter twin turbocharged engine in a mid-size truck is a decent option? Always love hearing from you guys. But if you did like the video, don't forget to leave that thumbs up. And if you like cool stuff like this, don't forget to subscribe. We always have cool stuff planned. Enough of me. We'll see you in the next frickin' video.